Hi, boys and girls. It's Mrs. Flagar here, and I'm here to read you a nonfiction story called Let's Explore the Moon. So remember, nonfiction means we're going to learn facts. Where is the moon? There are 8 known planets in the solar system. All the planets travel around the sun. Some planets have satellites called moons. Earth has 1 moon. Here's Earth, and here's our itty-bitty moon. The moon travels around Earth once every 29.5 Earth days. This journey is called its orbit. Moon facts. The moon is much smaller than Earth. Nothing lives on the moon. It has almost no atmosphere. The moon's surface has not changed for millions of years. The surface of the moon is rocky, dry, and dusty. Earth is nearly 4 times larger than the moon. So Earth, moon. Like Earth, the moon is always spinning. The time it takes for a moon or planet to spin around once is called a day. 1 day on the moon lasts about 27 Earth days. On the surface. Look at the moon using binoculars or a telescope. You will see dark, flat areas, mountains, and lots of holes or dents called craters. Look closely, you can see a crater. Craters on the moon formed millions of years ago. Huge rocks flying through space crashed into the moon and made craters. The far side. The same side of the moon always faces Earth. That is why early astronomers had no idea what the other side of the moon looked like. The side of the moon that does not face Earth is called the far side of the moon. In 1959, a Russian spacecraft called Luna 3 studied the far side of the moon. This is a drawing of Luna 3. Luna 3 took this photograph of the far side of the moon in 1959. In 1990, the Galileo spacecraft took this photograph. It shows the many craters on the far side of the moon. The moon's shapes. Sunlight shining on the moon allows us to see it from Earth. Each week, the moon looks as if it slowly changes shape. Sometimes we can see one full side of the moon. We call this a full moon. Other times, we only see part of the moon. When we cannot see the moon at all, it is called a new moon. As it orbits Earth, different parts of the moon are lit up by the sun. The blue line on each moon picture here marks the part that we see from Earth. These photographs show the many different shapes the moon seems to have during 1 month. So this full is a full moon, and when we cannot see it, it is called a new moon. The moon and Earth. The moon is in orbit around Earth. A special force called gravity holds the moon and Earth together in space. The moon's gravity affects what happens on Earth. It is the force that helps create tides in the ocean. As the moon's gravity pulls on Earth, water in the oceans bulges slightly toward the moon. We call this water movement high tide. It looks like this. A low tide can also happen. Low tide happens on the parts of Earth away from the pole of the moon's gravity. Low tide looks like this. Water on the moon? Astronomers have not found liquid water on the moon, but they think they might find ice at the moon's north and south poles. Comets are dirty ice balls that fly through space. They may have left ice on the moon. If there is ice at the moon's poles, it could not melt. The ice would lie too deep in the moon's craters and would probably be covered with moon dust. The sun's heat never reaches those places. Someday, people living on the moon might be able to melt the ice and drink water. This painting shows a future moon base. Men on the moon. The moon is the only place in space that people have visited. In all, 12 people have walked on the moon. The first manned spacecraft landed on the moon on July 20th, 1969. Neil Armstrong was the first person to walk on the moon. He is on the left of this photograph. As Neil Armstrong took his first step on the moon, he said, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." Buzz Aldrin was the second person to walk on the moon. Moon landers. Apollo 11 was the first mission to land on the moon. Its spacecraft had 3 main parts. One part was the lunar module called Eagle. Eagle carried astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to the moon's surface. Astronaut Michael Collins stayed in orbit around the moon aboard the other 2 parts of the Apollo 11 spacecraft called Columbia. They were linked together. So here's the Eagle lunar module that landed on the moon, and here is Columbia. When the landing part of the mission was over, Eagle blasted off from the moon. It hooked up with Columbia. The astronauts headed back to Earth. The Apollo 11 mission was a success. Travel and life on the moon. Astronauts on the Apollo 15, Apollo 16, and Apollo 17 missions used lunar rovers. A lunar rover is often called a moon buggy. The last moon landing mission was Apollo 17. A lunar rover looked like a car with no sides, top, or doors. A lunar rover could carry 2 astronauts and all the moon rocks they collected. A lunar rover did not go fast, but it was fun to drive. Someday, we may return to the moon to build a moon base and stay for many months at a time. Is there a trip to the moon in your future? I hope you boys and girls enjoyed learning about the moon. And if you've been following the news, you will know that we are trying to get spacecrafts back to the moon so one day people can go back to the moon and start that moon base. So with your family, go ahead and discuss some facts that you learned about the moon. Maybe even talk about, would you go to the moon if you were an astronaut? Why or why not would you want to go to the moon? Have fun talking with your family all about the moon. Bye.